Charles. Is that recording too? You tell me. One sec. Let's just double check. Okay, go ahead and test your mics.
Test, test.
This is me. Can you hear me? All right. All right.
Go ahead. Yes, sir.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to, what's our name? I remember our name.
The podcast, I didn't know you was going to give it one. It's True Leaf Market.
What was our name?
True Leaf Market.
In the Dirt.
Oh, dig in with True Leaf Market.
Welcome to our first live stream. All right. How do we want it?
Go ahead and introduce yourselves. What the topic of the program is going forward.
All right. Welcome to Dig In with True Leaf Market. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Jerry.
And we want to start off by getting to know Jerry a little bit. He's one of our on-staff horticulturalists. So Jerry, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you have gotten into gardening?
Well, I got into gardening because I inherited it. I mean, my family has been. My grandmother was a huge gardener for years, master gardener for years and years. I kind of inherited the gene, played in the dirt a lot when I was a little kid. You know how it is. I decided to make a career of it and studied at Utah State University. That's in the northern part of Utah. A plant science degree was the program I was in. I think it still exists. It's kind of one of everything. That was a long time ago, though. I warn you.
And how did you get involved with True Leaf Market?
I went to work for the original founder, what is now called True Leaf Market. It was then called Greek Gardens Nursery. It was a nursery and seed business based in Logan, Utah. And over the years, they eventually closed the retail nursery and went full time with the seeds. And then it is now, it has been, of course, the founder has moved on. Well, he's passed. And it is now True Leaf Market. It's essentially the same company. So for all practical purposes, I've been with the company almost since its inception. We were tiny back then.
That's awesome. I bet you've loved being able to see the growth and how much you've brought on and expanded over the years.
The growth has been staggering. It has been a ride, I'll tell you.
Well, amazing. Well, we want to get to know a little bit about kind of your personal favorites in the garden. Can you tell us what some of your favorite vegetables are or just things to grow in general?
I'm going to break a lot of rules. One of my favorites is just plain old zucchini. I do love my summer squash, just not yours. Thank you. I'll grow my own. And then I'm really fond of some Asian greens. I'm in a kind of an exploratory phase with a lot of Asian greens that we historically really didn't know, or I didn't know existed. And I'm having a lot of fun with Asian greens recently. Things not just pak choi, but bok choy and tatsoi and mizuna and mibuna, and there's just a whole long list. Gailan, just to name a few.
That's awesome. I know I could definitely get to know those Asian greens a bit better. But they're very yummy. I've tried other people's. They're great. Highly recommend everyone give them a try. And we know gardeners don't always have the best methods, or they don't always practice what they preach. So, do you have any like red flag gardening habits that you do, even though
the kind of thing that I tell people not to do, but I actually go ahead and do it anyway? I overplant like crazy, and I know better. We all do. So I tend to sometimes, to start planting very carefully, and then pretty soon you're just throwing seed at it. I'll come back and thin it later, and then when you come back to thin it later, you discover that thinning is just as tedious as that careful planting was. Overplant, and just not leaving enough space for them when they get big. I want to plant this and this and that. And the other thing is just planting too much in the spring of the year. We're all antsy. We're eager to go. My January garden is my best garden. But come about August, it's so my advice, especially to beginners, a smaller, well-tended garden is really much more satisfying come about August than a great big weed patch.
I definitely feel that. I know my red flag is very similar. I like to start a lot of things ahead of time though, indoors. And I have to plant a full tray of something, that adds up quite quickly.
You don't want to just throw what are you going to do? Just throw the plants away? No.
No, you give them away. You have to share them, spread the love.
Plant them in every nook and cranny.
The nice thing is you can always turn it into a little bit of an edible landscape, stick a few veggies here and there. People really don't know, and they're actually quite pretty when you think it out strategically.
I've done Swiss chard as in the front bed in a flower bed.
Yeah, we've actually got some Swiss chard that we're going to be growing in our front flower bed out in front of our warehouse here. So let's go ahead and dive into our topic for this live stream, which is spring garden preparation. So can you tell us a little bit about what you think the most important things are when it comes to preparing your garden during the spring season?
Well, assuming that this is not your first time and that you already have a pretty good idea where your garden is going to be, and the basic idea is to clear it out and prep it for planting. For a lot of us, of course, the traditional way to do that is to till, clean, till, level. Nowadays, some people are moving away from the whole tilling process, but you still need to clear it, get the level right. You can't change it later, and soften at least the top layer in order to receive the seeds. Another one of the very first things I do once it's cleared and leveled is start to mark it out, in deciding where you're going to set out what. In my case, I usually do plant in rows, although they're very short. And I kind of got to have some idea where those are going to be and what's going to go in where.
Awesome. Well, I know, as we're talking about clearing the area, some people like to start cover crops earlier in the spring. So can you elaborate a little bit more on the specific aspect of cover crops?
I'm a huge believer in cover crops. I have cover crops going, both coming and soon to be mowed. And we're trialing even a summer cover crop blend this year. But so you really should terminate by chopping or mowing your cover crops and getting them either worked into the soil or at least laid down on the soil 2 to 3 weeks ahead of your planting date. You want to let that decomposition process get a head start on your garden. And I am just now cutting down my main cover crop for my summer beds, which I won't plant until late part of May.
Mm-hmm. So if you want to grow a cover crop, make sure you plan ahead a little bit, get it in early in the spring, or if you want to do one later in the fall, but be sure to allow that space before you plant your main crops like tomatoes and peppers, because otherwise they're just not going to thrive as well as, if you plant them in right after, you're going to be tying up some nutrients in the soil.
They really do add both structure and nutrient. And yeah, they're a little bit of a hassle to deal with, but it's still better than letting the land go unplanted or barren for any length of time. Bacteria doesn't like that. And any organic matter that you could work into the soil during the preparation, whether it's from your cover crop or from compost that you've brought in, or some of the ground bark products that are available on the market as a soil amendment, get them in at this stage of the game.
So while we're kind of talking about the soil, can you elaborate a little bit more on why people should prepare their soil before they're planting and what some of those benefits are?
Well, because sometimes you can't do it after. It's just too late to do anything too deep if you've already got materials growing in it. But it really is, just as you think, the most important part of prepping this all up. The soil is one of the key elements of success in the garden, and getting the right texture and the right fertility in the soil ahead of time is a big help. Now, we can side dress with fertilizers, whether you're using organic or conventional fertilizers at certain points during the growing season, and I recommend doing that. But there's a lot to be said for getting a good fertilizer, whether, again, it's organic or conventional, worked in the spring.
Now, I know a lot of questions that we get around soil tend to be people who are having a hard time growing in hard clay-like soil. So what are the best things that people with that situation, what can they add that will help improve their quality?
We're right back to organic matter all over again. It's the same thing whether you have a very sandy soil or whether you have a hard clay soil, which, trust me, I've been in places that were both. And the organic matter helps in either situation. Don't be tempted to add sand to clay. That is not effective. Organic matter is your key, and the more the merrier. But it takes time. You have to do this over time. It takes years to develop a good soil.
So once you have your ground cleared and your soils prepared, we want to look at plants a little bit next. What are some things that people can do to prepare their plants if they're taking, either garden starts or they started indoors already?
If you started your plants indoors, it's really important that they go through a hardening off process before you plant them in their final location in the garden. By hardening off, you probably all know this, but the idea is just to get them acclimated in steps to the environment they're going to be in. Typically, we would take them out for just a few hours a day for a few days in a row and then extend that a little bit longer. And the whole process can take a couple of weeks is a good idea. And by the end of it, you're basically leaving them in the containers outside 24, but right through day and night cycle. But you have to, especially at first, be very gentle with it. Watch the water, watch the sun. Someplace that is a little bit sheltered. Mine get morning sun, but afternoon shade is a great place to start hardening off indoor plants. You want to get them too big or abrupt a climate change can stunt or even kill your plants. You will lose some. I've lost plants in the hardening off process. It happens.
My favorite comparison is it's like callousing your hands. Like if you're working out or you're working outside, you start to get that callus that protects your hands against friction and heat. And it's kind of the same idea for plants, that as you slowly acclimate them, they build up their cell walls so that they can withstand, raindrops and wind and temperature fluctuations and be able to just maintain some level of homeostasis in their little plant bodies.
The wind, the moving them around a little bit is one of the things we've only recently kind of understand how much that helps strengthen the cell walls and creates for a stockier. And also the much higher light levels. Even in a good light garden, you're not producing light levels like a direct sun.
Yes, the sun is truly the best source of light. So moving on from indoor starts, what are some things that people can look forward to or plan to direct sow into their garden?
Yeah, the question about direct sowing or starting indoors and transplanting out, it's actually better when you can to direct sow for most crops right where you're going to get them to grow. But for many of us, that's impossible for some long season heat lovers like tomatoes and peppers and things like that. There are a lot of crops which should never be transplanted. Root crops, for instance, they don't take transplanting well. We always direct sow them right where we're going to grow them. There are a lot of crops that you could do either way, but there's advantages. The advantages of starting them ahead of time pretty much disappear a lot of the time. Some of the kind of crops that you can go either way are the cucurbit groups. That's the group that includes cucumbers and squash and melons and that kind of thing. Yes, you can start them indoors and then transplant them out, but it's questionable whether by August you'll get any real advantage, depending on the crop and your climate. Because when you transplant them out, they'll stop and they'll sit there for a little while, and the seed I have planted cucumbers from seed and starts, very same cucumber, started myself, very same spot. By August, I can't tell them apart.
Yeah, that's always great to keep in mind. A lot of people think, oh, it's too late to start a garden. But the reality is that no, it's not too late. In fact, right now is the perfect time to sow. And then I want to kind of give people an idea of how they can continue gardening throughout the season. So in your mind, is there any time that's really too late, or are there things
you just
people
shift your
should plan
crops a little bit? You shift your crops, but there's always it's almost always time to plant. If your ground's not frozen or too muddy, it's almost always time to plant. But yes, there are some things you wouldn't here in the Mountain West where our summers are really hot. We don't plant lettuce in June. It's just not going to work. They're going to bolt. But there's always times that you can plant them. I really recommend that you get a planting calendar for your area. They're fairly easy to get. I would go first to the Cooperative Extension Agency for your area. They'll probably either have one or be able to direct you to where to find one. There are some online where you put in like a zip code and it can give you a planting calendar. The whole concept being there's always something to be planted, but it doesn't all go in all at once. And some crops, many crops, can be planted multiple times over a period of time, or a spring planting and then a summer planting, which comes on in the fall. So a spring crop and a fall crop of some cool weather crops that don't like the high heat of our summer here in the West. Of course, it depends on where you're at.
So could you just further outline a little bit what some of those cool season crops are that people could plan for a fall harvest?
Sure. So the cool season crops then we think of as being the brassica group. That's the cabbage family: cabbage, kale, kohlrabi, all of those. Those do well when the weather is cool. So in the spring, or for us here in the spring or fall, some of them, and to start the fall, we often start them in summer. We often plant them in summer, but they're maturing in the fall when it's cooled off, and it's much better. The heat lovers, or the contrast to that, the heat lovers are things like tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers and squashes. They love the heat, and they just sit there when the weather's cold. They'll just sit there and do nothing. So it is kind of depends on what your weather season is, what it's time. For us in Zone 7, we do our hardies typically sometime in March, our semi-hardies in April, basically anytime in April. April's wide open. Our tenders in the first part of May, and our very tenders, that's the tomatoes and peppers, don't usually come until the second part of May. And then we can start again in August planting for fall.
So make sure that you plan ahead and plan for your fall garden so that you can have a bountiful harvest going into Thanksgiving time, Halloween time. But also don't be afraid to be planting right now and even into the summer. Just make sure you choose the right crops for the right season. And like Jerry mentioned, go ahead and get a planting calendar to help keep track of all of those different things that you want to start and when to plant them. So I'd like to just wrap up here, and we want to mention a special sale that we're doing right now. We are celebrating Earth Day weekend, and so you can go to our website right now. We're only doing this sale for 48 hours, so it ends on the 23rd at 9 a.m. Mountain Time. Use code EARTH, capitalized all the way, capital EARTH 25 for 10% off site-wide. So be sure to stock up and get your favorite veggies and herbs and flowers and more.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.